Hi and welcome to the Bruce Channel. I'm Bruce. Big day, lots of stuff. So we will start with the weather. Wow, floods in California. They desperately need the rain, but ending a drought of epic proportions in just a few days is probably not the best idea, but that does seem to be what has happened. And they got big snow up in the mountains too, and that's good long term, but not so good to get it all so quickly. And then there's monster flooding along the Gulf Coast and up through the Mississippi Valley. So Texas has huge floods, and Louisiana's getting it, and Memphis, my goodness. The thing is, they told us this was coming. It is an El Nino year, and they told us what it was going to be like. They told us also that it was likely to be the biggest, most influential El Nino ever recorded. It appears they're right. It is also interesting that even though the El Nino has begun to cool, its greatest effects are probably yet to occur over the next several months, sort of like when solstice happens in June, but the hottest days of summer are yet in the future. So speaking of heat, a couple of times we've gotten down cold here, but it seems to have become mild again. And it's early in the year. We are already on track, vis-a-vis comparing to last year, on track to make 2016 the warmest on record, which would break the record set last year. We've been doing this consecutively now for several years. Just this week, one morning I was talking to a friend of mine in Cleveland. It was 67 degrees there. Here it was 64. 64 here would have been called unseasonably warm, but not ridiculous. I have no idea what you would call 67 in the morning in early March in Cleveland. Unseasonably warm just doesn't seem to have enough. Oh, and there is less Arctic ice for this time of year than in any other known year. Oh, last week I told you the camellia was going to pop. It did. All right, so back to El Nino. It's expected to give way to a La Nina by the end of this year, and that is a cooler than normal Pacific patch. That would set up next year, 2017, with a more active Atlantic hurricane season, and it would begin another cycle of drought in California. Oh, that rain in California? Yeah. Death Valley is known as the lowest, driest, hottest place in North America. But for the moment, it is not Death Valley, but Resurrection Valley. It is blooming, some 20 or more species of wildflowers, and it is a rare event. The last time it happened was 11 years ago. All right, not that it is a rare occurrence. Every second around the world, 1.8 of us cross the river Styx. All of us will eventually. But this week, on Tuesday, the world of music lost a giant. Sir George Martin died at the age of 90. He had a pretty good run. Sir George was the producer of all but one of the Beatles albums. He signed them to their first record contract in 1962. No one else would. And he taught them and he encouraged them, and they revolutionized rock and roll. He was demanding and he was tough. He had hired a session drummer instead of Ringo for an early recording of Love Me Do because he didn't think Ringo's drumming was good enough. So Ringo got better. Years later, Martin called him the greatest rock and roll drummer of all time. But Sir George knew music. He had studied oboe, he had studied piano. Sir Paul McCartney's plan was to sing Yesterday, accompanied only by his guitar. George convinced him that a stringed octet would make a dramatic effect, and he was right. When those strings come in at the beginning of the second verse, it is as though angels were playing. Remember, this is when rock and roll was having hits like Sonny and Cher's I Got You Babe, when the Stones couldn't get satisfaction. And this tender song has a chamber orchestra essentially backing it. It was revolutionary. He didn't only produce the Beatles, he worked with many others. Among the best, Michael Jackson, Elton John, Celine Dion, Shirley Bassey, Ella Fitzgerald. Shirley Bassey sang the title song of the James Bond film, Goldfinger. Martin produced that, and also the title song to Live and Let Die, which was Paul McCartney's. I think there are only 5 record producers with number one hits in 3 different decades, and that is rarefied air. Sir George Martin is one of them. But he's the only one to have done it in 4. That really is rarefied. Of course, we began the week with the news that former First Lady Nancy Reagan died at her home at the age of 94. As you'd expect, everyone had nothing but nice things to say. President Obama ordered the flags to be lowered to half-staff in her honor. And when the word came out late Sunday morning, NBC dropped the scheduled programming on both NBC and MSNBC. Now, she did have her detractors, especially while President Reagan was in office, and certainly her consulting with astrologers before approving the president's schedule, and she did have to approve them and many other activities. All right, consulting with astrologers was a bit daft, perhaps. And the Just Say No campaign against drugs, well-meaning but probably a bit naive. But you know what? She wasn't mean. She was passionate about her husband. She was a mama bear protecting her cubs. If you did something against him or gave the impression that you were going to do something against him, she would take you out. Now, not out of hatred. Not out of hatred for you, but of love for him. She had a long life, mostly healthy. She showed her love especially when she cared for the former president, even after he passed from the here and now because of Alzheimer's. Now, you might not have agreed with her. You might not have agreed with her husband. But today's Republicans, in all of their speeches, raise the specter of St. Ronald Reagan, one of the great Republicans, but, unlike many of today's Republicans, he didn't hate the opposition. He didn't call them ugly names. He was more than civil. He was friendly. He'd go have a beer with the Democratic Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill, his political opposite in policy. Compare that to the venom of today, even within their own ranks. If she hadn't been so frail these last couple of years, I believe she would have come out and called these people out on how divisive they have become. All politics aside, the most uplifting quality of the Reagans was they seemed to be as much in love with each other, even unto death do depart, as 2 teenagers just discovering the rapid pulse, and shortness of breath, and the dry mouth that comes with young romance. On Friday, she was laid to rest next to her husband in the Reagan Memorial Library. Rest in peace, Mrs. Reagan. So I suppose we do have to touch briefly on the political news of the week. I've occasionally shown the Greensboro papers This Day in History. March 8th, it showed us this. New Hampshire voters lined up in unexpectedly large numbers in several cities today as the nation's first presidential primary of 1960 got underway. A surprise snowfall that started shortly before dawn apparently was having no effect on the balloting. In Millsfield, the 4 voters, all Republicans, gave their votes to Vice President Nixon. They wrote in the name of New Hampshire Governor Wesley Powell as their choice for vice president. And although that wasn't that long ago, it's not like it was the Middle Ages or even the Victorian age, there was television, but it sure was different. New Hampshire was the first, as it is now, but it was in March. The next primary was to be Wisconsin. That was another month away. The article made no mention of Massachusetts Senator John Kennedy, probably because he was unopposed. It was the next state over. Even more striking, compare what we do today. Jeb Bush was announcing his exploratory committee back in 2014. They've all been campaigning since spring or summer. In 1960, John Kennedy announced his candidacy on January 2nd of the election year, just over 2 months before the New Hampshire vote. And that's not all that has changed. Abraham Lincoln, a Republican, started the National Academy of Sciences. Today, most of the Republicans mock science, and some of them mock learning in general. You don't even have to go back as far as Lincoln or even Kennedy As mentioned, Ronald Reagan and Democratic Speaker of the House Tip O'Neill were at odds, but they were not at war. Just this week, former Senate Majority Leader Trent Lott, Republican, said that were he in charge, he'd consider President Obama's nominee for the Supreme Court Justice. And he also said that unless there was something egregiously wrong with the nominee, meaning, he's convicted of being a child molester or running a house of ill repute, he would vote to confirm, even if the nominee's views were completely opposite his own, because that's what the president gets to do. And for the record, as a Republican senator, he did vote to confirm Bill Clinton's nominee, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and she is probably the most liberal justice on the court. All right, so 4 states voted Tuesday. Trump won 3, Senator Cruz won. Ohio's John Kasich did find a second place in Michigan, next door. Senator Rubio finished either third or fourth. I believe he is toast, whether or not he wins his home state, Florida, this week, and I don't think he will. He may pull out in advance of that. At my deadline, he has not, but by the time this publishes Sunday morning, he may have. Now, this was interesting. The Sun-Sentinel newspaper in Florida made an explicit point of not endorsing a candidate in this week's upcoming Florida primary, saying, and remember, there's just 4 left, the kind of person who should be running isn't even in the race. They laid out the case for and against each one. They said that Ohio Governor John Kasich might be the best of what's left, but that his campaign hadn't given them much confidence. Google the Sun-Sentinel Republican endorsement. For or against, it was a fascinating read. Still, the biggest news Tuesday wasn't how badly Senator Rubio did or how well Donald Trump did. The biggest news was this. The last polls in Michigan before the voting had Bernie Sanders down by over 21 points to former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Over 21 points. And he won. Historically, that is the biggest upset ever. That's bigger than Truman over Dewey. And no one knows how it happens or what it means. They don't know if it was a fluke. Can he really win in big states? Ohio is a similar state, and they're voting this week, as is Illinois and Missouri, also in the Midwest. Now, here in North Carolina, I vote this week too. Here there is no mystery about the outcome. It will be Trump and Clinton, I predict.
Hey, let me tell you about my book, Shrink. For most of my adult life, I weighed a little over 100 pounds. Not much more than in this picture taken when I was about 17 and considering becoming a jockey. But as is often true, once I crossed into my 40s, extra weight came and it stayed. For years I tried to lose, instead gained, and ended up 153 pounds. And I'm embarrassed to show you this video. Then I learned that it isn't about calories and exercise, but instead it's about what you eat. You might say, sure, ice cream makes you fat. But there were surprises, things like orange juice not being such a wise choice if you're trying to lose weight. So I just made some basic changes to what I ate, not how much, and the weight just fell off. Now, nearly 3 years later, it is still off. And don't misunderstand, I'm eating foods I like, not bamboo shoots. Friends ask me how I did it so often, I put it in a book. It's available as an ebook for all platforms, and the print edition is available at barnesandnoble.com and amazon.com. Hey, you can shrink too.
All right, so welcome back. Remember, you can see all of our previous episodes either at our Facebook page or at tinyurl.com/BruceChannel. And you can write to us at the Bruce Channel at yahoo.com. All right, so some quickies. Not only will the primaries be Tuesday, which is March the 15th, and not only will the buzzers return to Hinckley on that day, Hinckley, Ohio, it will be the Ides of March. So for heaven's sake, if you're out and about, guard yourself. Either carry candy bars to feed everyone you see who looks lean and hungry, or wear Kevlar. And then, 2 days later, you can go out and party. It'll be St. Patty's Day, have the green beer and all the other things, corned beef and cabbage. And then at week's end, you can head to San Juan Capistrano, where the Swallows will return on Saturday. For the first time since 1924, the Summer Olympics, you're going to have rugby. That's not quite 100 years. Now, I knew rugby existed. I knew that American football sort of evolved from rugby. I knew that there was a thing called a scrum. and that the ball was neither round nor like our football? Well, apparently the teams from the various countries are working their way through playoffs and elimination rounds to get to Brazil. I don't know how many teams will play, but you have to get there, and everybody doesn't. So this is really cool. I was flipping around the channels on Sunday, and there it was. And I got to tell you, I don't quite get the rules. They weren't really explained. I'm going to have to look that up. But a touchdown actually has to be touched down. And when a player is tackled, the play isn't dead. Everybody just tries to grab the ball out, and it's very strange. A touchdown is 5 points. The extra kick is 2. But the extra kick isn't from straight on. It's from way off to the side. And all the kicks, including kickoff after score, are drop kicks. The passing is very different because, again, the ball doesn't have much of a point, so they just kind of two-hand lob it. You can probably find some this weekend. It is so completely different, I was drawn in. And even if I don't completely understand it, I suggest you take a look. Another part of the appeal, they're not using helmets. There's no shoulder pads. They play in short pants and short sleeves. They're sliding around and tackling on grass, and so there's lots of bloody scrapes. But the most striking thing, nobody's trying to kill the other guy. It's refreshing. There's sportsmanship. I saw a man beat the defenseman just by a little bit into the end zone, and he touched it down. And the defenseman who was beaten gave him a pat on the back. He was sorry to have been beaten, but he gave him a pat on the back. This is exceptional. I'm going to read up on the rules and get to know more about it before I watch. This is really cool. Speaking of football, American this time, it was no surprise Peyton Manning did announce his retirement. Maybe he'll become the Browns president. After all, he's good friends with Browns owner Jimmy Haslam. And the Browns just got rid of their previous president. Peyton Manning will be first ballot Hall of Fame, even if a couple of question marks surfaced in the last couple of months. Allegations of his having used human growth hormone while convalescing from his neck surgery a few years back. More recently, allegations of sexual impropriety while he was at the University of Tennessee. He denied it. Of course he did. Will we ever know? Likely not. He can throw the ball. At his announcement, he did say a few notable things, the best one being, I will miss that handshake with Tom Brady. I will even miss the Patriots fans, and they should miss me. They got a lot of wins from me. And then he almost left. He came back to the microphone and said, Omaha! One last time. Other sports news. The men's college basketball conference tournaments wrap up this weekend. We learn tonight, Sunday, which teams make it into March Madness. The women's tournaments are a week ahead. So I follow sports, but I don't talk a lot about basketball. I don't follow it closely. I don't hate it. I just don't have a first-person knowledge of this game that they play. When I played, everybody shot the ball up. Today in the pros and in Division I college ball, they fly through the air and they throw the ball down. I never played that game. I never will play that game. Anyway, I do live in basketball country. The ACC is a basketball conference. And around here, March Madness, it begins in earnest before March. All right, a couple more quick sports notes. I mentioned the Olympics this summer. They're going to see rugby for the first time since 1924. But golf will be back for the first time since 1904. Whoa! So I didn't learn this until this week. So it's way too late for me this year. But I may want to tweak my game for 2020, you know? I never really had the motivation to practice golf that much. You know, why become really good? Millions in prize money? Sure, yeah, so what? But an Olympic medal? Wowie zowie. Oh, you know, baseball has been underway now for several weeks, spring training. Early this week, a photographer caught these two pics. Instead of tragedy, it's gone viral, and it is something to look at and say, oh my heavens. Mr. Sean Cunningham took his 8-year-old son, Landon, to his first Major League Baseball game, spring training. It was his birthday. Pirates outfielder Danny Ortiz loses his grip on the ball. Now, I've seen that many, many, many times at the ballpark, and sometimes the results are pretty awful. Take a look at this. How close is it? And Sean's quick reflexes saved the day. All right, finally, I plan to tell you about last week's end of the week filming, but too many things that were time perishable came up this week, so the lab coat and the stethoscope, easy for me to say, the stethoscope and several other non-time perishable items, they will have to wait for another week. But you can find out more about the movie I talked about last week and filmed 2 weeks ago, Obamaland. Just go to the International Movie Database, that is imdb.com, type in Obamaland, and you can see some of the synopsis, and you can see pictures of the cast. Yes. So I hope you'll do that. All right. Anyway, that's it for this week. I hope the upcoming week is the best one you've ever had.